In section 3.6, we are going to talk about rotations as our next form of transformation. Remember, we're still talking about rigid transformations because our rotation's not going to change our size of our object. So if we look at the first common rotation about the origin, the first is a 90-degree counterclockwise turn about the origin. So the way we do this is we are going to switch the coordinates as our first step. So if you look here at our transformation, our x becomes our y and our y becomes our x. That's what it means by switch the coordinates. You're going to flip those two numbers, and then you're going to multiply the first coordinate, which is our new x, our old y, our new x, by -1. So that is where we get this new transformation from. So if you look over here, we went from 2, 2, so when we flip them, it doesn't make a difference, it's still 2, 2, but we add that negative sign to the first number. That's how we get our new point. And that point goes from here to here. For our g, we flip our numbers, we get 1.5 and 4, and add our negative sign to that first one. That's where our new g comes from. And then same with the h. Flip the numbers and make the first one the opposite sign, or multiply it by -1. Okay, so let's look at an example. This says we have a triangle with vertices L, M, N. Draw the image under a rotation of 90 degrees counterclockwise about the origin. Okay, so remember counterclockwise about the origin. It's important to remember 90 counterclockwise is this transformation. So if we look at our points, let's start by graphing. We have L is -2, -1. M is -1, 2. And we have 1, -1. This is our original triangle. Now if I list my points out so I can use my transformation, my transformation for a rotation 90 degrees counterclockwise is going to be -y, x. So this means I'm going to flip my points. So I get -1, -2. I'm going to multiply that first number by a negative, so that means it's going to be a positive. M prime, I'm going to flip my numbers and multiply that first one by a negative. N prime, -1, 1, I flipped my numbers and multiply that first number by a negative, so it becomes positive. So now I have my new points that I can graph. I have 1, -2, -2, -1, and 1, 1. So this is my new image when I rotated it 90 degrees counterclockwise. Our next common rotation is a 90-degree clockwise about the origin. And this is similar to the other one, where we start by switching our coordinates, but this time we're going to multiply our second number by -1. So remember, you can use your notes on all of your homework assignments and on your tests, so make sure you're referring back to your notes so you don't forget which transformation is which. So if we look at this example, -1, 1 becomes 1, 1 without that negative. So we switched our numbers and we took away that negative on the second number. Again, for 4, 5, switch our numbers, multiply our second one by -1. Switch our numbers, multiply the second one by a -1. That is how we get our new points for the 90-degree clockwise turn. So let's do an example. Start by graphing. So I have x is -4, 1. y is -1, 5, and z is -6, 9. So here is my original, z, y, and x. I'm going to list my coordinates, and then I can do my transformation. So we just learned that my transformation in this case is going to be switching my coordinates and making my second one negative, or multiplying that second one by -1. So when I have x prime, I'm going to get 1, -4, but I'm multiplying by -1, so that means it's going to be positive. Switch my coordinates, 5, -1, multiply by -1, makes it a positive. Switch my coordinates, multiply by -1, makes it positive. So now I'm ready to graph my new image. I'm going to go 1, 4, x prime, 5, 1, and 9, 6. This is my triangle, rotated 90 degrees clockwise. Our last type of a rotation is to rotate a figure 180 degrees about the origin. To do this, we multiply our coordinate by -1. So x is multiplied by -1 and y is by -1. If you notice, this is the same as reflection across the origin. So rotating 180 degrees or reflecting across the origin gives us the same answer. So if you look, we took our q, and our q prime became +3, -2. We switched the sign on both our numbers, or multiplied both numbers by -1, whichever way you want to think about it. So we did that for all our points down here. Remember those zeros, you can't change the sign on the zero, just stays 0. And when we do that in graph, we get this image reflected 180 degrees. So let's do an example on our own. Again, just as always, I'm going to start by graphing. So I have A is -1, 1. B is -5, 1. C is -5, 4. And D is -1, 4. So this is what I'm starting with a rectangle up here, and I want to rotate it 180 degrees. So I'm going to find my new points. And to do that, my transformation goes from x, y to -x, -y. So I'm going to multiply every number by a -1. So when I do that, I get 1, -1. -5 times 1 is 5. -1 times 1 is -1. Get 5 and a -4. And a 1 and a -4. This is A prime, B prime, C prime, and D prime. Now I'm ready to graph my new points. So I have A is 1, -1, A prime. B is -1, 5, negative 1. C prime is 5, negative 4. And D prime is 1, negative 4. And this is my image.